the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is EdTech, episode number 11, recorded Friday, December 7th, 2012. Parental advisory. It is time for EdTech, the education-focused podcast and show given to you by the AVNation guys. My name is Tim Albright. I'm your host. With us, as always, is Mr. Scott Tyner from Bates College in the great Northeast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Also, just further down the coast is Mr. Matthew Silverman from George Mason University. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
And finally, in the real part of California, not the part that's snowing and raining, is Greg Brown from UCLA. How are you, sir?
Hello, Tim. Hello, guys.
This month we're going to talk about Coursera and a couple other places where you can get free education. That's right, I said free. Just don't tell any of us. Interactive whiteboards and AV system testing for all of you guys that are getting ready to go into your winter breaks. This would be a good time to do that. But first and foremost, all four of us here have Crestron systems in some way, shape, or form. Is that a true statement? Somebody correct me on that. Everybody has some sort of... Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Don't call me sir. Good Lord.
I've got one up and running right now.
Well, see, so all of us have one.
Boss.
And I think I said this last time. I'm in the process of doing my first DM system, so I'm slightly frightened and scared and excited all at the same time.
As well you should be.
By myself, I should mention that. So this week
should be.
Yeah, we all got the fancy smanchy email from the big guys in Jersey. They have a new program, and it's called Crestron Studio. I don't know. I've started downloading it. That's how much I know about it. That and in downloading it, just like with every other software from every other company, it tells you all the requirements and, oh yeah, I don't have this version of Toolbox that I need, which is one of their programs that's required, and I have to upgrade my version of Simple. But beyond that, I still haven't gotten, but I checked out the video and stuff like that. It looks like a cool program. It's supposed to be, all-encompassing and everything. Mr. Brown, Mr. UCLA, what is your first reactions, or do you have any comments or questions about Crestron Studio?
Well, let's start out initially here with a complete digression. Speaking of Crestron, I finally have an A+ rep again.
Oh, very good.
Yes, the Southwest U.S. I'm not quite sure how big of a territory. We now have the lovely Brenda Brook is our A+ rep here for this area, and so after like a 9-month absence, I think, without we had our local sales contact, but we didn't have an A+ rep, but we now have an A+ rep back, which is kind of cool. And as far as Crestron Studio, I don't know a lot about the Crestron programs yet. But I have a friend of mine who does independent Crestron programming, and her comment was, "This is the end of Crestron programming as we know it."
I would agree with
that. I was kind of taken back by that, and so I'll kind of like toss that out there and let the two smart guys talk.
That would not be me. That would be Mr. Silverman and Mr. Tyner. So, gentlemen. Scott, we'll start with you on this. Is this the end of Crestron programming as we know it?
I'm with you, Tim. I haven't even actually started downloading yet. I've watched the video, like I'm sure everybody listening to this has. There's a couple really interesting things I like about it.
Cool stuff. Check out the video. Follow the link and watch the video.
One of the things I like about it is it does seem like everything is kind of packaged into Studio. You don't have to go out to Engraver. You don't have to go out to VT Pro. It's all there. One of the really beautiful things I liked from what they wrote is how you can resize touch panels automatically. Because if anybody out there has done iPad touch panels from a already built touch panel, it's a disaster. You need to completely kind of go and change all the sizes and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. here's what this says to me though. And I was talking, I was in Florida a few weeks ago with InfoComm, and I was talking to somebody there who's well known in the industry, and he was saying that programming as we know it is going away. When we can get a Denon app for our receiver, or we can get an iPad app to control our lights, that this independent programming that people have made businesses of is in jeopardy. And I think that what I saw when I looked at Crestron is it seems like, wow, that's really easy. And I think that that's what we're going towards. What he was saying is that we need to really focus more on apps, and app development is going to be the big thing. So, that's what I look at when I say, oh, is Crestron programming changing as we know it? I think that it's looking to me like it's just that much easier, that much more, just click and get it done rather than doing some of the programming that we're used to.
Well, and Matt, if anyone's ever messed with System Builder, let's start with that, and because that's my first reaction to this is all the big three, Extron and AMX and Crestron all have some sort of click and program type thing. This is so much from the look of it. Again, haven't physically touched it yet. So much better than System Builder because, like Scott said, it's all there. You don't have to click a button and go into and open up Engraver or open up VT Pro E. So is this kind of the beginning of the end for programmers?
No, so I'll actually disagree with that. I think it's actually the first move in the right direction, but there's still a lot to come. It's interesting, Scott, you mentioned about things getting easy, quick, click and drag. I was actually last week talking to Steve Greenblatt, who's a frequent contributor on the AV Week show. And one of the things we were talking about was that we saw on a sort of I guess a split in where things were going. That your more basic, I hate to use the word hang and bang, but we're all familiar with that concept, systems are going to go to this click and drag programming. Not necessarily that I think Extron got it right with configurable control systems, but it's where things are going on the lower end. I think what I see with Crestron Studio is the first move, though, for those of us who do more complex programs, beginning to open up the higher end of programming. For example, at George Mason, we try to maintain one code set for each main switch it's really been for us in our environment. So, for example, we have one code tree for a DM 8x8, one code tree for a DM 16x16. We're in the process of developing our DMPS 300 code. We may support 6, 8, 10 configurations off that single code tree. And Crestron Studio is starting to open up this whole Core 3, Series 3 advancements Crestron is doing, which will allow those of us who do more enterprise-level programming, more IT-style development, to really start leveraging some of that new functionality. I know we've talked about, I think, on this show a little bit and some of the other shows, simple Sharp, which is coming down the road, and C# development is something we're really looking forward to, because we actually want to get to the point where we're doing database connectivity, we're possibly even doing authentication, and this is finally a tool that Crestron put out, which is meant to provide that development environment.
So is this more along the lines of, oh, good Lord, what was it, 10, 12 years ago at InfoComm, the big sign that said convergence? Is this the kind of the end game for that, where Crestron is saying, okay, you know what, here's all of our chips in the IT/AV world, and let's kind of embrace this whole thing instead of this, instead of an ENet control, which in the Crestron world, that's how you connect to the network. This is and all our chips we're in the IT and the AV in the world. Is that what you're saying, Matt?
A little bit. It actually reminds me something on my first Crestron training I went to was something back in 2003, and I was up in New Jersey sitting there trying to learn Simple. And as I was trying to do some programming, the instructor actually saw the pained look on my face. And But it led to a very interesting conversation, which was, well, you're thinking like an IT programmer. I said, yeah, I've done at that point a little bit of C, a little bit of Pascal, some Visual Basic. And he said, you need not to, because Simple's designed more like electrical engineering. And it's designed more like making a circuit board and doing signals than object-oriented programming. What I see with this is starting to transition into more of an IT style of programming, which I think will open up, again, on the higher end, make it much easier to add a lot more functionality into these things, bring in additional information systems or building systems or things of that nature, which right now doing in Simple or Simple Plus is difficult, if not impossible. To give you an example, we've parsed XML files in our control systems. I am not our programmer, so I don't know what went into this, but I know from talking to our programmer, writing an XML parser was one of the most difficult things he's ever done in Simple Plus. To give you an example, that's kind of like a week one training exercise for someone who's doing programming in C# or something like that.
Wow. All right. And for me personally, I think it's the end of programming as we know it, but I think it's a good thing.
Yes,
think
I'll agree with that 100%.
I do, because we had Fred Bargetzi and a couple of guys from Crestron on the AV Week show a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the whole, the C# thing, the simple sharp, in other words, the Crestron programming language, the one that really lets you do things is currently called Simple Plus, and what they're moving towards is something called Simple Sharp, which is close to C#. And what it allows us to do is, and I like the electrical circuit board analogy, it allows us as an industry, granted this is just one company, but hopefully others will follow suit. It allows us as an industry to say, you know what, not only do we have electrical engineers who should feel comfortable in this industry, but IT professionals as well, guys who know how to program, in Pascal or in C+ or in C#. They should feel comfortable in this industry and should blossom really, really quickly, instead of having to go to BIAMP training and AMX training and Crestron training before they really feel comfortable. They should be able to get their feet wet and then take off. So.
Yeah, Tim, I guess one other quick point. I think one of the things that should be said is right now this is a scenario where everyone wins. Yeah. Because if you're already an AV programmer, they still are supporting Simple Plus, VT Pro. You may have to do it slightly differently, but everything you can do today, you can still do today. As Scott mentioned, it makes it easier for those who are doing very simple systems, maybe with a little bit of variation, to do a little bit of drop and drag. Yeah. And anything's better than Systems Builder. And that product just was awful. And then for the last group, people like, where we are, where we're looking to do advanced functionality, this is the first opening. Yeah. And now over time, I think it may change the equation, but right now, this is I think really good for our industry.
I think after our conversation, I'm going to write my program in both Studio and Simple and see which one I like better. So, all right, let's talk about some displays. What was it? A couple months ago, Apple came out with the iPad Mini because they didn't have enough money, and it was a smaller device. It was almost Kindle Fire-ish, esque in the size. Well, Sharp said, you know what? I don't think people want smaller. I think they want bigger. They've released they've revealed a 20-inch multi-touch stylus-friendly display, which is funny to me because if you've ever read the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson, he hated styluses. He said, God gave me 10 styluses. Why do I need an 11th one? So... So, Scott, is this something that is in the whole, bring your own device type thing? Is this just one more thing that we're going to have to worry about? Or is this, this is just another display and they're going to come and go just like, flavors of ice cream?
Well, I think it's just another display. go back and forth on touch screens, on whether we need a stylus or not, so often that it's hard for me to answer a question like this. I've said before in the show, and I think it's true, that until you change the interface, there's no point in touching a screen. And so, until the interface, like the iPad, is designed for touching, why are we bothering?
Yeah.
And it looks like some of the stuff that Microsoft is doing with the Surface and the new Windows product, they are designing this stuff for touching. So I think we're starting to see that change. But don't give me Windows 7 and want me to touch it to use it, because it's not designed for that.
All right, Mr. Brown. Is it like, Scott said, don't give me Windows 7 and expect me to touch it?
Yeah. Let's see. What was I saying? On my note sheet here, where I have the topics listed, and I've written down my little notes of my thoughts as I read through the articles. Here for the Sharp, I wrote YAWN. Yawn.
I had to spell that out. YAW. Okay.
I'm sure Scott and Matt figured it out.
I thought you were going to come up with some cool acronym, like
I did.
You are with. I don't know.
Nincompoops.
No, you're giving me far more credit than I deserve at this hour of the morning.
He's in California. They just.
It's very early.
They surf. They eat avocados, and that's pretty much it.
Right, although the sun has come out, so I think we'll survive another day.
Good.
No, I mean, and we wonder why Sharp is in trouble. I mean, looking at it from a classroom perspective, I don't really see it. I think if you want to talk equipment that's going to be brought into the room, I think somewhere more in the tablet, maybe these convertible laptop, spin the screen around, turn it into a tablet sort of thing, are what people are going to bring in. They're not going to bring this, dumb interactive. Well, I don't mean that dumb. I mean dumb as in like no computer, but I don't know, draw your own conclusions. And as far as installed equipment, I think we're much more likely, if we're going to install something, go with like a big interactive flat panel monitor or something like that. But no, I didn't really get this. Although let me rabbit trail us again. I got a chance to see the and stop me if I talked about this. I don't think I've mentioned this, but a few weeks ago I got a chance to see the new Panasonic interactive flat panel monitor, and it's it clearly a competitor for like the Sharp and some of the others out there. It's great big, I don't know what it was, like 70-inch flat panel monitor, and it can do all of the smart board-esque features. Plus, you can bring up a window, and you can surf the web on it. All of those same features we're seeing in these things. Physically, it was a much nicer implementation than the Sharp. There wasn't stuff stuck on the back. It was one nice integrated purpose-built monitor. But it was, getting back to the whole stylus thing, it was not touch sensitive at all.
Huh?
You had to use the special pen to do anything.
See, and to jump in, I'm with you on there. I don't like pens only, which I guess I'm the only one who actually liked the Sharp product, because the Sharp had multi-touch along with the pen.
Yeah. I liked the Sharp.
But not the Sharp monitor, the Sharp 20-inch.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Right, this, okay.
Because it actually fixes the problem I have right now. Is we use a decent amount of smart podiums in our classrooms, and those are not touch. Those are just pen-based. And we've actually been seeing a lot of interest in putting, we right now only put them in our largest lecture halls, but we've seen a lot of interest in putting them elsewhere because of thinking about distance education. And even with the best camera setup, how do you capture the instructor either pointing at a screen or a monitor, And if you can encourage them to even just use an annotation overlay on a panel like this, you can then capture that on your content that gets recorded for lecture capture and such. So I saw a real neat place in this. Now, my big concern is, like a lot of Sharp products, it will never make it over here from Japan.
Well, yeah.
Or Sharp may not be in business by the time that it gets released.
Yeah, or if you buy them, who's going to support it next year after they go out of business?
They're not going to go out of business. Panasonic will buy them just like they did Sanyo.
And that went so well for people who signed up for Sanyo products.
Well, you could buy Christie's,
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, did you hear about the other suitor for Sharp, Dell? That would be kind of interesting.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, that'd be horrible.
I bought about had about 40 Dell video projectors.
Ew.
Oh wow!
One of the stupidest mistakes I've ever made here in my time here.
You realize we're recording this, right?
What do you think you think somebody at Dell actually listens to this?
No, I was talking about your boss.
Oh, don't get me started.
All right. Who do they OEM those from, by the way? Does anybody know who they OEM those from?
We always tried to figure out. They were a Chinese made something.
Yeah, but they had to be somebody, didn't they?
Yeah, I actually thought they were
weren't
well-known, like 3M or something.
They weren't completely identical to anything, but they looked very similar to all of the really, really dirt cheap like Optimas and the stuff that was coming out at the time. Yeah.
Okay. I mentioned Christie as kind of an aside. I had the chance to I was helping a friend of mine, and I was looking at the Christie and looking at the code. It's the exact same code and the exact same structure as the Sanyo was 2 years ago. So I don't know what they purchased. I think they purchased some of the patents, or they purchased the rights to produce some.
Christie's lower end, their LX, some of their LX were actually Sanyo OEM'd for them.
This is a current, so this is a one they just brought brand new, and obviously
then it may be a Panasonic OEM for Christie.
It might be.
Well, remember the other folks we talked about a few shows ago, the ubiquitous platform division at Hitachi.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
They make a whole lot of people's projectors.
Yeah, but their code is weird. So, all right. That's how I know people sometimes. It's like, okay, that's your control code for that. All right, it's okay.
Actually, Projector Central, when they find out, they will list it on their website who actually makes a projector.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good resource.
And it's a really useful thing to have.
It's a good resource for a couple of things. You could also start looking for, if you have a price point and you have a lumens range you're looking for, it's a good resource for that too. Next up is from InfoComm International / Brad Grimes / Matt Silverman.
I've heard of him.
It's actually Brad Grimes. Yeah, he's a nice guy. It's on there.
This is a tough room today.
It's a tough room. It's
Friday.
It's on InfoComm's website. It's called Designing for High Contrast. Easy for me to say. How one university uses InfoComm's projected image standard, and it actually is about our buddy Mr. Silverman, who's on, I think at this count, 20 different standards committees.
Just
well,
once.
I think he's on every committee, isn't he?
Yes. Did you? All kidding aside, were you on this standard committee?
No. I'm actually on the standard steering committee, which is kind of the overall group, the guidance group for all steering.
So you are on every standards committee then. That wasn't a joke. Holy, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No. So this came out of InfoComm actually requires 5 tests that are done to make sure the standard actually works before we move forward. So I had volunteered to do one test, and it ended up turning to be a pretty good case study and conversation.
Well, what's interesting to me, and we'll start with you on this, obviously, Matt, is the fact that you had basically art faculty that said, you know what, some of these projectors aren't exactly cutting it for us. So you're crazier than I am. You said, go ahead and find the rooms that you want to use, and we'll go from there. and you worked with the registrar's office, and basically when that faculty wanted a classroom, that was pinged. And then you guys took this standard and said, well, let's be a little more systematic about this. Let's do the test. And so kind of walk us through exactly what the standard is and how you guys went about doing the test.
So basically the standard talks about projected image contrast ratio. It's actually projected image system contrast ratio. So it's not just the projector. It's how the entire system provides contrast ratio. And really this goes back as long as I've been at George Mason. Our art history faculty have just been unhappy with what we can provide. Actually, they were really unhappy that we took slide projectors away.
Higher ed people all insert your joke about art history faculty here.
And we were working very closely with the registrar, and rather than us say, you go in here, the registrar actually agreed that, hey, they can pick and designate some rooms as, I think they ended up calling them like high quality, which means very little, but that's how they ended up getting coded. And what we were finding as we were working with them is contrast was really the driver. That's what they cared about. So as I mentioned, we had done a test just of one of our typical rooms, and we had found that it was something providing like a contrast ratio of like 7-1 or 8-1, somewhere in that range, which by the standard, and we're shooting for what's called the basic decision-making area, should be 15-1. So obviously we weren't quite cutting it. And what we've been trying to do is make the decisions more about quantitative data rather than subjective data and someone just saying that room looks good. So we actually are working right now on an update to our facilities guidelines, and we are putting into our facilities construction manual a requirement that any new classroom after this manual is published achieves a 15-1 contrast ratio as measured by ANSI InfoComm 3M 2001.
Oh, wow.
Now, here's the real trick for all of us who are in this. You're not going to fix this with a brighter projector unless you're moving up to a 10 or a 15,000 lumen projector. What you really need to look at is controlling your light at the screen location. So it's kind of funny that this is actually almost not an design problem. However, until we were able to quantify it and give a measurement, our facility staff was not willing to even have this conversation. So we're really happy that this is going to make it into the construction manual.
Well, yeah, and the other I was going to ask you, and you kind of mentioned it, isn't some of this, because you did do away with the kind of the subjective where a guy walks into the room and goes, oh yeah, that looks good, because depending on the time of day and where the lights are, where the windows are and the shades are up, the shades are down, that's not really going to be real consistent. But you at least you mentioned the fact that it had to be at the screen. Do you guys think, and anybody can answer this, do you guys think that in addition to controlling the lights, are any of these contrast screens, whether it's daylight or Stewart or Draper, would any of these help increase that contrast rating, or is it really about controlling the lighting?
I'll let Greg answer that question.
Greg?
Ooh, I don't. I haven't played much with those screens recently. I mean, I've got some of the gray screens that were the big thing there back about 10 years ago, but I haven't done any of that recently. I've just generally tried to buy brighter projectors.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
You know what that I like about this standard, it's one of the reasons I want to talk about today, is that we are looking at a system contrast ratio beyond the projector contrast ratio. And I think it's interesting because it also ties into one of the other topics we're going to talk today about the testing of a room when you're done, which is I think that one of the things that a lot of us have got into is this: put the room together, make sure the projector's square on the screen, and hit the road.
Mm-hmm.
And are we really tuning these rooms right? Are we doing any color management? What Matt has talked about here is the contrast ratio. Are we doing any color management at all on these projectors? Are we really we've been through like Matt has time and time again. We're in a place now where our facilities groups talks to us about an AV install and budgets for it, but they don't talk to us about the room environment.
Yeah.
And the shades that you need in the room, the lights you need in the room, where you need them, are they zoned? And so that's really where this struck me, is it really gives a kind of that official piece of paper. Here's a certified standard, and we can start talking with people about this, and it means something.
Well, it's a mark that you can go to that says you either met this or didn't. Just like SPL. You want the SPL to reach so much plus or minus 3 dB over the course of the space in the room. It gives you a number to go back to and say, yes, Mr. Installer, whether that's internally or externally, this room is satisfactory.
Right.
Well,
now, Matt, I think it mentioned in the article, but I did have a question. When I read the article, it sounded as though this also isn't a terribly time-consuming thing to do in a room.
It's the first test, I'd say, took us about an hour. And it's basically a test procedure where you have to take tests from 5 different positions in the room and then work it all out. I had actually built a Excel sheet for our technician who did the test, so he didn't have to do any math. He just put the data in, and it basically did it all itself. It's not terribly time consuming. Plus, if you actually get people trained in how to do it, I'd say you could probably knock this out in about 30 minutes per room.
Wow.
The other piece of it is you do need to buy a measurement tool, and again, that wasn't even too terribly expensive. I think it was about $800. But having one for the university wasn't too bad. It's not like you need a $10,000 tool.
There's an app for that, isn't there?
That's half my budget for the. Are you kidding me?
Actually, no. There was absolutely not an app for this. But what I was going to
$800. What are you buying? I thought.
I'm kind of blanking on the name of the tool right now, which is why I've been stalling.
Quick Google it while I complain about $800.
We'll fill.
But the other thing I did want to bring up, and Tim, I'll send you a link so you can put this in the show notes, is that Greg Jeffries, who's the current president of InfoComm, and he's also now the moderator of one of the standards groups on display image size, which you should be seeing coming pretty soon, has put together some great downloadable calculators and kind of some white papers explaining all this about contrast from his company's website. And it's one of the things that someone had mentioned earlier on, is that, what about, your screen? Does that matter? And the answer is it does. But if you look at how, if you do the math, the thing which will give you the most bang for buck is going to be controlling your lighting levels at screen location.
It really is lighting levels.
I mean, your 4 variables roughly are your screen material, your screen size, your projector brightness, and then your lighting levels at screen. And so as you start playing with those, you can actually use the calculators Greg has put together. There's Excel things to figure out where you're going to get your bang for buck. And for where we've really looked at, you'll see the most gain from working on lighting levels.
Very cool.
So what you're saying is a good pellet gun should accompany all installs.
I didn't say that, but it doesn't hurt.
And of course, that it's the one thing that is furthest out of our control.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, absolutely it is.
And I did remember the name of the tool now. What you're looking at is a luminance meter, so you can measure.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not an illuminance meter, which
it's not a light meter. It's
yes, it's a luminance meter.
All right, you are listening to EdTech with Matt Silverman, Scott Tyner, and Mr. UCLA. Go Bruins, Greg Brown. A couple of different stories here, kind of all in one. The story that we're kicking off with, though, is the fact that interactive whiteboards are up 22% year to year. Yeah, me too. Scott, is this a surprise? And who the frick is buying these things?
Well, I'm actually.
Don't tell me you.
Oh gosh, it is.
Oh
No, wait a minute. What's all this song?
how the heck is Bates College propping this up 22%?
Well, here I don't think we are because we haven't bought one yet.
It's a Maine thing, I guess.
We like touching things in Maine.
We're just going to need a parental advisory on all of our shows
I'm
from
just
now
gonna
on.
just take off the clean rating.
I've mentioned on the show before, we've tried symposiums. They haven't taken off. But now we're looking at these boards for our smaller rooms. You know, we have classrooms here. You know, we're not one of these gigantic universities. So we have classrooms here that have, 14, 15 to 20 students in them. And so we're thinking if you were to take an interactive touch panel monitor and put it up on the room, a 70-inch or so, and the professor can now not be behind a podium, but can be standing in front of the room. There's no light shining in their face, and interact with this panel. And again, with software that's designed for it, our hope, with Windows 8 and the like, is that software is designed for it. Maybe that will work. And so I'm really curious to hear your experiences. I think are going to tell me it hasn't worked where you are.
Well, I guess my thing is the definition of interactive whiteboard. Let's start there. I've got two different. What you're talking about is an all-encompassing, all-one unit, and the experience that I have is the device itself, the physical piece, is separated. There's a projector that's projecting an image, and all this is tied in together through the PC. So that's my experience, and that to me has been very, very clunky. At least, again, my own personal experience. Greg, is that yours as well?
Ditto, yeah. Clunky, and we have a very hard time getting. You get an instructor who wants to use them, and you can't get them into a room that has one. That's our problem.
So
we literally would have to roll out something to almost all of our rooms to make it an effective rollout.
Well, let me tell you what I'm thinking about, and you can tell me what your reaction to this is. We're working with a company called Touch It Technologies, which is listen, I'm telling you the truth. I'm not trying to be a comedian here. It's better than Touch Me Technologies. So what they have are LCD and LED monitors that connect to whatever computer you want via HDMI, and they have a USB connection. So you can install this wherever you want. And you interact with them by touching them, up in front of the room.
Yeah.
And so they're actually, if we look at what we're spending on a smart board and a projector, these are less expensive than those two devices.
And see, if I had experience with an all-in-one device, I may be a little bit more apt to these. But this year, and this happened to be the most recent experience, we have an 8-year refresh cycle on our projectors. Well, this year we're in the past 3 or 4 years, I think, we've been moving everybody to widescreen because 16 by 9, 16 by 10. Well, all of our smart boards are still 4 by 3, so I'm still buying widescreen projectors, and cropping them and doing the quick corner and just total destroying the original image just to make them fit on these stupid, ignorant whiteboards.
And that's because you guys wisely have decided not to go with the 21-inch, $3,000 symposium, or something like that, which we ended up doing at Bates because we use only symposiums, not the actual smart boards. And their widescreen, it takes up 3/4 of our podium to begin with, and it's just ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, we tried one of those too and had the same problems. The problem we've had with those tablets is getting them to finding a way to mount them in some way that people are happy with them, that you can actually use it in a way that multiple people will like. Some want it to stand up, some want it to sit down. What piece of furniture do you put it on? Something up high like a lectern, or down on top of a tabletop?
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I'm hoping that these panels on the wall are going to be successful, because it gets the teacher away from behind the podium. They're out in front of the room. There's no projector out on an arm. It's a monitor.
I'm going to install my first one of those probably in the next week or so. Interactive projectors.
And I will say that as far as our symposiums, which we do a bit of, we do put those on articulating arms, so the instructor has a bit of range of motion. But I absolutely, Scott, agree with you that having like an 80-inch LED or LCD on the wall is the way to go. We're actually really looking at that. We have a class of rooms we call a seminar room, which were all smart boards, and from a support perspective, they have not been the greatest. So we've been looking at both the Sharp and I think not the Panasonic. I think Samsung had one as well that we were looking at. But the idea of actually being able to touch it rather than being forced to use a stylus is something we're really interested in.
Right.
Now, Tim, back to your initial question, how were sales up 22% on these boards?
Yeah.
That was in the UK.
Oh, okay, well, there you go.
They're actually down in the U.S.
They're just weird over there.
Well, and they did also say in the article there that this was the first growth in 7 years.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And that kind of that's where the whole thing kind of confused me.
15 or 20 a year for the last 7 years, and all of a sudden they sold 28 or something like that. Yeah.
But I think if Sharp or whoever owns Sharp in a year can get the price down on the 80 and the 90-inch boards, those are going to be huge in our space. Because for your 20-seat or less room, that is a phenomenal solution.
And how expensive are those now?
The 80-inch is about 7,000.
Yeah.
7,000. The 90-inch is, I think, closer to 13 or 15, something like that. So that one I don't consider that affordable quite yet. But the 80-inch is at a price point that it's actually comparable with the smart board and projector all-in-one solution.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Wow. All right.
Well, and you can project it. I mean, that's the neat thing about those things. You can also put them in. That's the thing I think some people are not always thinking about. It's not just a small classroom application. You can put one of those in a big auditorium and plug it into the projector.
Yeah,
that is
and
true.
project it as big as you want. That's actually where we've talked about it more so than the small rooms.
Yeah. All right. Next up is from Fast Company, and this is technology in the classroom, but it's also classroom technology outside of the classroom, if that made any sense to anybody. This is about Coursera, which is a website, but it's also a bigger story, and that is the fact that with Stanford and with a bunch of other colleges that are offering free courses to literally hundreds of thousands of people at a time, where does that leave us at AV guys? And I ask that because this is one of the stories that kind of grabbed me over the last month or so. It's a pair of Stanford professors who have stopped being professors at Stanford, which if you're in the faculty world, Stanford, I would guess, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of the Yankees, right?
Boo.
Okay, sorry. You're in the Northeast. Who is your team?
The Red Sox.
Oh, that's right. That is closer to you, isn't it? Okay. I thought it was like the Alaskan Huskies or something.
Don't disparage their sports teams. They are obviously in desperate need of some healthy hobbies up there.
Yes.
Just don't ever mention the pinstripes again on this
All right.
broadcast.
Well, for me, it's the Cardinals. So, there you go. But
you beat them in 2004.
Yes, you did. On our home team, on our home field. So,
let's talk about hockey.
And I insert, chirps. So there is no hockey. This is something that is a shift, and the story goes. It's a pretty long story, but it goes on to describe a handful of people. The guys at Fast Company did a Skype interview with all these people, and they are literally all over the world. There's a 16-year-old kid from Greece. There's a couple of people from the U.S. talking about learning computer engineering and computer mechanics through these free courses. And I say free. So here's where I'm going to go in with this. Whether that is the fact that George Mason or UCLA or Bates or Lewis and Clark gives away free courses, or you guys, in your next iteration in the AV world, start working for Coursera or the other companies that are mentioned in the article, where does that leave us? What exactly are we to do, I guess? What is our job function in an environment where, we don't have to have an interactive whiteboard. We don't have to have a Crestron control system. But there is a function, and I guess my question to you guys is, what is our function in a world where it's online, and that's where we go? Greg, I'll start with you on that. What is our function in this sort of classroom?
I don't think we really know where that sort of classroom is going to go yet, because one of the things they touch on briefly in there, but they really don't talk much about it, is nobody knows how the credit end of things is going to work out with these things. And, most of our kids, they're not here to learn. They're here for the diploma. Newsflash. And so, yes, a lot of people who previously did not have access to information are going to be learning a lot of new, neat, great stuff. God bless them. But as far as us in higher ed, there's a whole bunch of stuff there yet to be figured out, as before I see this. There's this gap in between all these neat ideas and, us in the great big pretty stone buildings over here on the other side. And I'm not quite sure where how that divide is going to be crossed.
Yeah. Matt, do we have a place in this online learning world?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think our place is actually very close to where it is today, in the sense that this speaks only to one type of learning style, and you have to be able to learn like this. And that I don't have any numbers I can quote, but it's not going to eliminate the classroom. It's not going to eliminate in-person teaching. It's not going to eliminate collaborative experiences. It'll give people access to knowledge who wouldn't have had it, which is a phenomenal thing. But it doesn't necessarily disrupt the model to the point that, we're now making buggy whips.
Wow.
And so
buggy whips are us.
Thank goodness.
It's a good thing, because I don't know what a buggy whip is.
Scott
Damn
stole my
kids
joke.
these days.
But no, I don't think this obsoletes our industry. What I think it does is opens a new one.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Mr. Tyner there, all kidding aside, you are in the great Northeast, and you're in Maine. So we've talked about this before, that you've got a wide area where, the next college around you to take graduate work or postgraduate work is quite a ways away. So colleges like Stanford or maybe even Bates would offer this. Where does that put guys like you and me in helping these people, get the next degree?
Well, I think that Matt, has hit part of this on the nail on the head with this, is that it's not just a specific type of learner this affects. It's a specific type of student even. And, the students that we read about in these articles are students who are really interested in learning something and really motivated. And you might get a lot of kids in colleges, even, decent colleges like Bates or Stanford, who come here not enormously motivated. And that's part of the job of the college, is to get them to find something that they love and to study it. So I also sit there and I go, okay, Scott, because I'm, got the same question you do, Tim. I'm saying to myself, does my job exist in 10 years?
Yeah.
And so and I'm telling myself, don't be foolish and say, of course it has to. Really think through it. And I really think there's a number of reasons. Let's not be, I'm not trying to be silly here, but college sports is probably one of them that argues for brick and mortar campuses. And I actually saw a really interesting article, I'm not going too far off here, the other day about how we should actually let students major in sports. It'd be an interesting topic someday for a different webcast. So I think I think it's going to change. I think it is going to change some schools like Bates. I don't think Bates or any of these a lot of these brick and mortar schools are going to go away, but we're going to use some of the stuff from Coursera. I took a course in Coursera, and this is me, right? I signed up for it and never went once.
Which is the beauty of it. You didn't waste any money.
I didn't waste any money, but it's also. I think it's really great to have this open education. I'm a big supporter of free open education, but I don't see how it's going to replace the college degree. And I think part of what we may find out 20 years from now is the idea of what a bachelor's degree has completely changed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a very complex issue.
I'm signing up for a class right now that I'll never take. So.
I think if we want to get into sort of the future guessing game there, I think where this is probably going to lead is we're going to start talking more about measuring how much people actually learn and also what sort of jobs they get after college. Because,
based on what they learned, yeah.
Yeah, we crank out a ton of econ majors, many of whom are sort of, asking you if you need paper or plastic with that.
And there was an old joke years ago about journalism majors. I say that, really close to a major, a master's in mass communications, about, you could be, a journalist, or you could, ask exactly that. You want fries with that.
Yeah. Right.
So,
right.
All right.
Right, and you want to be, and Tim, you're sensitive to this obviously because 10 years ago I'm sure there's lots of people going, God, the newspaper industry, it's never going to have any problems. People are always going to need newspapers.
Maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Like 10 years ago, the writing was on.
10 years ago is when they started writing the papers that said the death of the newspaper. So, a couple real quick one, guys, and we'll get out of here. Matt, we're going to start with you. We are, most of us at least, I think all four of us, are getting ready to head into our winter break. It's a good time to check your systems, make sure it's make sure everything still works while the faculty are away. The story that kind of kicked this off is from AV Network. We'll put a link to it. What do you guys do to make sure that your stuff is still working? What is your system training regimen? Like, do you have a checklist? Do you have, this is what comes with every kit that I give my guys that go out and test? What do you guys do?
We actually look at this at two places. The first place is what's it called? When we actually build the system, we have a very detailed commissioning checklist to verify everything worked day one. From a follow-up perspective, I believe it's once a week our operations managers do a room check where they check consumable levels, as well as just do a basic routing functionality test. And then both once and then in January and then in August, we actually have a checklist we do per room for a more thorough test. And it also looks at some of the environmentals, like is the room clean? Are all the chairs there? And things of that nature.
Oh, okay. So you check all that stuff.
Yeah.
Mr. Tyner, do you hang out during the winter, or do you go off and do something else?
Well, this is one of the wonderful things working at Bates is that between Christmas and New Year's we close down.
Oh well, never mind.
and we are told go
Same
home,
here.
and it's a free vacation.
Wow.
But we do some things. We don't do quite the deal that Matthew has. We've got 75 rooms on our campus. We're all within surrounded by 4 city streets. And so it's a small campus. So here we look at this one of two ways. Our rooms get tested about 8 times a day. Mm-hmm. And we know if there's something wrong with them because we hear about it. The other piece is that we will go into a room because I believe is that, like Matt said, we'll go into a room during the break, check the lamp life, make sure that nobody's knocked the projector, do a basic look over of the room. And we make sure it looks neat and clean. I am a firm believer that if you walk into a space and it looks like a mess, you're going to treat it like a mess.
Yeah.
And so we do that. We do check that out. It amazes me. There was a back and forth on a listserv that I'm on the other day, and there was one of our colleagues at, I'm guessing, a very large university, said they have a student go through every one of their classrooms every morning.
Wow.
And I was exactly, and I was like, wow. I'd love to talk to that person about that, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, for starters.
Must be nice to have a budget.
Well, I look at it one of two ways, and I'm joking around. So if this person's listening, because I don't even know who you are, but if the person's listening, I'm only half making fun of you. Which is, number one, if you've got that many problems, you might want to reassess what you're doing. And number two is it worth the money? So if you're finding that many problems, which is the only way it'd be worth the money, you need to figure out why you're finding that many problems. And if you're not finding any problems, then gosh, that's a lot of money you're spending.
Yeah. Although, did you say it was a student or an actual worker?
They hire students to do it.
No, well, they're students. They're disposable. All right. Last but not least, guys, this comes to us from an interesting site. Huh?
Greg has.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Greg. What do you do?
I mean, as far as the regular inspections, yeah, we try and send students through typically every quarter. They'll be doing that a bunch here during the break, going through, make sure there's a backup light in the overhead projectors and things like that, a backup lamp. And but yeah, it's all students. As far as like hardcore stuff, we build our stuff in house. We're a crew of 3, and one of those 3 is my maintenance guy. So we literally don't try to get back to rooms for years in many cases if we can avoid it, because we don't have the time.
Yeah.
With 200 rooms,
Well, that makes sense. And it's kind of we do kind of a hybrid of this. Every summer is our check everything. That's when we do our refreshes for projectors. But then we have content management inside most of the rooms, and so that's kind of what I figure that's what that's there for, right? That's what Room View or Global View is for, is to tell you when there's a problem. And then, of course, you also have, the irate professor that couldn't get his projector on at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you're on your way to work. So, not that happened this morning or anything. Hypothetically. This has been an interesting year, guys. Scott, we'll start with you. I found this website looking for stories for this month. It's called hackeducation.com. They've got all kinds of good education, technology and education.
Great blog.
Yeah. A couple of stories that I kind of just wrote down with the Apple iBooks, the new software that came out in, what was it, January, February. The whole BYOD, the bring your own device, that was kind of this year for that. What was the big story for you, Mr. Tyner, for 2012?
Well, I think that this is me that it's about, and for us, it's been about course capture and video streaming. Those are two things that Bates has been waiting to see succeed other places, but has this year jumped on it full force, and it's been the biggest thing that we've had to deal with in 2012.
Very good. Mr. Silverman, what was your big thing for 2012?
Incremental growth. It's really, there wasn't anything radical that we did this year or that I've been involved with, but everything we've been doing on has been, iterative design improvements or just little changes to make the environment better. So that's kind of been our theme.
Mr. UCLA, what was 1 or 2 things on your list for this year?
I liked Matt's answer. I mean, it's almost we're almost inside sort of this world of we got all sorts of stuff going on that we don't know quite how it's going to shake out. How we don't have BYOD figured out. How are we going to deal with iPads? How are we going to deal with iPads wirelessly? Course capture, like Scott mentioned. I mean, there's a huge growth area. I heard something recently where they were talking about the next big thing in course capture once they really get the what's the word I want? The voice recognition side of things down is that we're going to be able to do course capture and indexing where all of the topics and things will essentially index themselves. I think that's going to be a huge game changer in that world. And we talked about these free courses and stuff like that, and it's almost touched on the MOOCs, as they're calling them now, these massively open online courses, which sort of tangential to the stuff we were talking about there with Coursera. But that seems to be one of the huge things everybody's talking about now. There again, also, I don't quite understand or trying to get my head around what's going on with those. I mean, you get a whole bunch of people together, and they're not paying anything to learn anything, and they don't get graded, and they don't get any credit. I mean, call me a curmudgeon, but we used to call those hobbies back a few years ago. So there's a bunch of neat stuff in play. I'm kind of reminded of the what's the curse? May you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a higher ed AV person, congratulations, you're living in interesting times.
Congratulations, you indeed are. For me, this was the year of digital, and this is looking at the industry and education overall, because let's not be too silly here. The end of this year, what happens, gentlemen? The official analog sunset on December 31st, the last of it, and so as we get on into digital, whether that's iPads and wireless video, or it's the fact that we have to have authentication everywhere that we didn't have to have 10 years ago. It is really the fact that we're going to have to make nice with digital, make nice with content protection, and go from there. Some of that is bring your own device. Some of that is some other stuff, but it really does kind of come down to content protection and making sure that not our bases are covered, but making sure that everything that anybody can bring in can be shown on the screen or shown wherever they want it to be. So that was all I had. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. With us has been Mr. Scott Tyner, a brand spanking new blogger for the Rave Pub blog squad. What have you written, like 10 so far?
I've written 2 columns for the EdTech
I thought you
newsletter.
wrote another one the other day.
Yeah,
I saw another one.
I write the columns for EdTech, and then I also follow up on those with blogs.
Oh, very good. Okay. So tell people how they can find you. You have a Twitter account now as well, so.
I do. I'm at STiner, STINER. And so you can find me on there, and I try to keep up with my tweeting.
It's a good. I don't know if it's a good pastime. It's a hobby.
He obviously has some questionable pastimes, so I think we should encourage the tweeting.
It's a hobby, like Mr. Brown said. That guy over there on the West Coast is Mr. Greg Brown from UCLA. How can people find you or harass you there, sir?
Also tweet at avgreg and can be found LinkedIn, and also blog along with a bunch of much more intelligent people than I at InfoComm's All Voices blog.
Yes. And also, last but not least, Mr. Matthew Silverman from George Mason University. How can people find you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter at msilverm, though I really haven't tweeted in quite some time. And my blog at this point is really stale, so yeah.
Well, no, but you also have the knowledge base, too.
I do have the knowledge base, avboc.com.
avboc.com.
Yes.
All right. My name is Tim Albright. If you would, I don't tweet much, but I do tweet some. That is TD, Tim David Albright, ALBRIGHT. But more importantly for me and for all the guys here, go by the website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. You'll find this podcast and a whole list of others. We have a live staging event. We have a DIY one, and also the weekly AV Week. You can find us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and all the other ones. So thank you so much for listening. That is all the time we have for EdTech.